This Q&A is comprised of some of the most common or interesting questions I've received in the past year. I found this old chart. What is this? Why is it square rather than round? What we're looking at here is the natal chart of Dr. John Dee. John Dee was a mystic and an alchemist who was also the personal astrologer of Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen married to England, who presided over what was known as the country's golden age. John Dee is still regarded as an excellent astrologer as well as a visionary and intellectual who had the largest private library in Europe. The nativity you found is square because that was typical of charts in medieval era astrology. You see, the square chart is actually easier to read than a circular chart when a lot of the old techniques are used. Medieval astrology is heavy on those ancient Hellenistic ways that modern astrologers no longer use. There are two other unique things to be said about medieval era astrology. The first is that it was highly Christianized. Due to the strangling influence of the church and monotheism, the Greek gods and goddesses were completely removed from astrology. They couldn't do anything about the fact that the planets were named after the gods and goddesses, but they ignored as much as they could. And the mythological stories in astrology all but disappeared. The other thing that was unusual about medieval era astrology was that it brought in the idea of bodily humors from ancient Greek medicine. Balancing the humors was how the body worked and how health was achieved. So planets and signs were associated with the humors. But the biggest difference between that astrology and modern astrology is the lens you look through. Medieval astrology is about timing and external events, whereas modern astrology is about the evolution of the individual. The crossover to the circular chart occurred in the 1850s, shortly after the discovery of Neptune. You say Capricorns are the builders of the zodiac. Is that because they want to build a legacy for themselves? Or is it because Saturn does things brick by brick? Both and more. Capricorn is interested in a legacy for themselves and also because they feel a responsibility to leave something for those who come after them. That is, after all, traditional. The brick by brick reputation means Cap thinks one brick on top of another is how you get to the end of a project. And you can call yourself a builder the day you have a building to show for yourself. Capricorn doesn't believe in luck or windfalls or get-rich-quick schemes. It believes you're rewarded in exact proportion to the work you do. You get exactly what you earn. Another question about Capricorn. What's the deal with the sea goat? The sea goat is the old symbol for Capricorn, and here's the deal with it. Capricorn is the sign associated with reality itself, and the sea goat is really a better symbol for reality than the mountain goat could ever be. Let's unpack the sea goat. It's reality. The front half of reality, the part you see first, looks simple and manageable. But go a little further down and you see that it has a slippery tail. What seems to be livestock actually has a flow, an ocean, and waves and strings. The sea goat brings together two things that have no way of being brought together. The goat that grazes the mountainside and the fish that cannot live on land at all. Why does this symbol represent reality so well? Because in reality, we have a dense plane of objects that's infused with the elusive, slippery realm of the spirit. And the physical world, the top half, say quantum physicists, doesn't actually exist at all. It's an illusion. In other words, what we have is all fish. But because we see through the body's eyes, and we have a physical body to care for, we see both halves of reality, both halves of the sea goat. We can't help that. And so the sea goat symbolizes reality perfectly if you understand the obvious. And that is, reality is psychedelic. Reality is illusion superimposed over spirit. Then the front and the back of the sea goat aren't at odds because nothing can be separated and everything is the same thing. You might be wondering when the sea goat lost its tail and just became the mountain goat. Interestingly, the sea goat screeched to a halt when Neptune was discovered. When we finally had a planet that stood for illusions, spirituality, and psychedelia, Capricorn became the mountain goat. For thousands of years, it seems, the sea goat was actually holding Neptune's place. As soon as Neptune arrived and the fishtail had a place to swim, it shimmied away. Can what we know about a planet and a certain sign affect the nature of a transit. Maybe Jupiter is really neutral when it goes into Leo, and we just get a bold, dramatic impact because we're expecting it. No planet is neutral as it moves through the zodiac. It behaves in whatever way the sign it's in dictates. Remember what I said in one of my earliest videos, and this is an old astrological teaching. The planet is the actor, the sign is the script, and the house is the stage. When Jupiter moves into Leo, it doesn't go in scriptless. It goes in playing a shiny, egocentric, self-expressive, glory-seeking part. Observations of these times is how astrological profiling began. Now, do we experience Jupiter in Leo as more bold and more flamboyant and more generous because we're expecting it to be that way? Maybe. The only thing that can tell us that for sure is a scientific study. Do you think you can heal someone else's psychological trauma with love? No, you can't heal psychological trauma or psychological problems with love. It's seductive to think that your love could heal someone's problems, but it's unrealistic. That is, unless there's some kind of conversion or deliverance at play, which is likewise out of your hands. It only seems possible to heal psychological problems with love because love is so powerful. It should be said, though, that any healing is easier if you're in a loving environment, an environment where you belong, where you're with your tribe, where you're with people who care about you, and where all the resources you need are provided. In a setting like that, healing, even transformation and metamorphosis, are easier. But if you're thinking you want to heal someone with love, use that love to pray for them. Send it on through the Holy Spirit. How would you change your analysis of Neptune conjunct the midheaven if Neptune is in the 9th instead of the 10th? I wouldn't change my interpretation. I would layer onto it. I would add to what I already know about Neptune at the midheaven. Firstly, we know the midheaven is career and reputation. Neptune conjunct that angle brings in careers around water, service, and spirituality. Oftentimes, we see healing therapies of some kind. We also find careers with abnormal schedules or remote locations because Neptune tends toward distortion of the norm. When it comes to reputation, we usually find someone who's seen as caring, a healer, or somewhat woo-woo. So I would start there. Then I would layer on what I know about the ninth house. The affairs of the ninth involve the search for meaning, finding your place in the grand scheme, and the big picture, things like law, politics, astrology, and other symbolic languages, religion, education for the purpose of enrichment, and international travel. Let me pull this together with a couple of scenarios. Now, if Neptune were conjunct the midheaven and in the 10th, we might find a nurse who has a reputation for being empathic and who works at a local hospital. But if we put that Neptune conjunct the midheaven in the 9th house, we could find a much more complex situation. We still find a nurse with a reputation for being empathic, but she works for Doctors Without Borders at a hospital in Afghanistan. Her work schedule is so unusual that she is able to spend 2 weeks each month traveling around Asia, from Tibet to Mongolia to the Kashmir Mountains. Since Neptune is associated with both isolation and videography, she posts a video diary of what it's like to be a woman traveling alone in more remote places on the globe. She's a natural teacher, so her videos are rich and informative, and there's something, somewhat glamorous about her. Therefore, her channel keeps gaining traction. We're talking about Neptune, so she has no fixed plan as to where this project might be going. Neptune does stuff just to be doing stuff. Let's have one more example. If a man has Neptune in the 10th, conjunct the midheaven, he might always have wanted to pilot big ships. And with Neptune in the 10th, that's exactly what he does. He drives huge ships for industry, ships full of merchandise up and down the East Coast and into the Gulf of Mexico. Very nice. How might that change if we put Neptune in the 9th house, but conjunct the midheaven? Now, let's say he drives ships for industry, but he pilots them across the ocean all the way to China and the Far East and back. While he floats, this man uses his time to study. He earns a PhD in maritime science, but he has a reputation for being very good at an old-fashioned little niche in maritime studies called celestial navigation. Even though GPS is used by all ships now, he has always enjoyed finding his route using the old sextant and the planets and the stars. So he goes back to the classroom as a professor. He knows there's been a revival in back to basics skills. So his retirement plan is to teach celestial navigation to offshore sailors, especially those who have yachts and who want to make their passages entirely without the use of electronic aids. He'll teach them how to do it using only the sextant, the stars, the horizon, the wind, and the ocean swells. I have to say this. The scenario I just used screams Neptune in the sign of Capricorn, wanting to do something of high responsibility, getting a position in industry, being industrious enough to earn a PhD in spare time, being drawn to an old-fashioned form of navigation, and wanting to teach those skills to people on yachts where he enjoys the prestige of being the wise one on board while in the lap of luxury is very Neptune in Capricorn. That's the only sign whose retirement plan includes another career. So you see, I start with Neptune conjunct the midheaven and pull in what the ninth house would add to it. And I would use the same method at all the other angles, the ascendant, the nadir, and the descendant. I've heard a few astrologers say that someone's actual home resides at the IC. Would you agree? And should we expect a move possibly far away when Uranus is passing over that degree? Should we expect restrictions when Saturn does the same? I would agree that your physical home is reflected by the IC, but not just the IC. It's reflected by the entirety of the fourth house, and that includes the signs, planets, and other astrological factors within it. The IC is too deep at the base of the chart to stand for what your house is like. The IC is your nuclear family dynamics, your extended family, your roots and heritage, and even what is carried in your genes. There's a lot at the IC and in the entirety of the fourth house. In answer to the rest, yes, a move is always a possibility when Uranus transits the IC, and that potential remains active during its entire transit of the fourth house. However, Uranus doesn't necessarily bring a move far away, as you put it, in terms of miles. Uranus's drive is to bring a move that's somehow radically different from what you've got. Sometimes that means many miles away, and sometimes Uranus manages that just fine without going very far. There's also potential for a move when Jupiter transits the IC and the entirety of the fourth house. though Jupiter is the moon bounce of the zodiac, so those moves are usually less disruptive and the landings are softer. I have an extreme example of this from my own experience that I'm going to share. It took transiting Uranus 7 years to move through my fourth house. And just guess how many times I moved during that 7 year period. 7 times. The moves were a mixture of not my choice, such as a divorce that was not initiated by me, and my choice, such as a very deliberate move overseas. There was actually a 6-month period during this transit when I had no address. I didn't live anywhere. Though I wasn't homeless because I was eating and sleeping in the same place I was working. Of course, after that, I moved again. I couldn't stay there. But by now, transiting Uranus was still in my fourth, but it had changed signs, you see, from active Aries to more stable and calm Taurus. So I thought all the moves were probably over. And I was hoping so, because I was really happy where I was. I was renting a little Adobe studio behind a magic shop, and I had already been there for a year. It seemed permanent. I love the desert and the mountains, and I planned to stay there forever. But Uranus lulled me into a state of happiness just so he could give me a big fat jolt. My landlady knocked on my door. She told me she had bad news. Her business was in peril. She was losing her house, and she had to move back into my place, so I had to go ASAP. We had no lease, so I figured I'd just get out. 48 hours later, I did just that. I moved into a place I knew was temporary. So temporary, I didn't even have my mail moved over. And I just sort of waited for the final move of the Uranus transit. And just before Uranus blew out of my fourth house, my sister asked me to help her in Houston for an unspecified length of time. That was it. I said yes. Strangely, I ended up living in my childhood home, which was on the market as a rental. Then Uranus was in my fifth, so the flurry of moves was over, or at least that's what I thought. 2 years later, Jupiter visited itself upon my fourth. Now, I knew another move was possible, so I was on the lookout. But nothing happened, and nothing happened. Nearly the whole transit ticked by, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I got away with it. 2 weeks before the end, the owners of my childhood home decided to move back in, so we had to leave. But Jupiter brings luck, so a for sale sign went up on the lawn 2 houses down. We decided to grab it. I didn't want to box things up just to immediately unbox it all. So I borrowed a shopping cart from Specs, and I did the move little by little over the next 2 weeks, wheeling stuff up the sidewalk. It was so trashy. But a Jupiter transit is a Jupiter transit, and it often has a sense of humor. You've got to roll with it. The point is, yes, Uranus in the fourth and Jupiter in the fourth are bound to bring movement. I got chaos during mine, but its purpose was to clear the ground and get me back to my family of origin so I could finish up the work I was doing with them. As for the other question, yes, the same is true of Saturn. He brings restrictions and limitations to what he touches. But again, not just when he hits the IC. Restrictions and limitations go on during his entire tenure in the fourth. Of course, Saturn has a totally different feel than Uranus. Uranus gives you a zap, rips you up by the tap roots, and throws you down like a rag doll. Saturn's style has a lot to do with the scythe he's always shown carrying. That tool means he cuts. During Saturn transits, it can feel like all manner of things are being locked off, and you begin losing advantages, losing money, losing time, losing space, losing options. And just when you think there is nothing more he can slice away, damn it if he doesn't find more things to cut. Saturn is a minimalist. So as he travels through a house, he lops away at the affairs of that house as per the script of the sign he is in. It's been so long since I answered questions, I had quite a few of them. I've answered the first half in this video. I'll answer the second half in the next. That will be coming up soon. Thank you for watching Secrets from an Astrologer's Desk. Stay tuned for all the ways you can get in touch for a birth chart reading and full astrological services. As always, I'm Joy. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, take care.